Welcome to Awakened Motherhood, the podcast where mothers share their powerful stories of healing and empowerment. I am your host, Amanda Quick, best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and advocate. In each episode, we dive deep into the stories of mothers who have overcome adversity, found their fierce feminine power, and embraced transformative parenting. Whether you're a mother driven to fight for your children or someone with a story burning inside you, this podcast is for you. Together, we'll explore themes of resilience, self-trust, and healing from our traumatic experiences, all spotlighting the profound journeys of awakened mothers. Join us for a space of naked authenticity, deep inspiration, and genuine connection. Embrace the divine feminine and discover your own warrior mama within. Welcome to Awakened Motherhood, where your story is the spark for change. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Awakened Motherhood. I'm your host, Amanda Quick, and these first few episodes, I want to dive deeper into what this podcast is about, what I want it to be, my vision, as well as how I got here. So in the first episode, I shared my big story, the one that I wrote my book, The Sex Trafficker's Wife, about, the one in my TEDx talk. And I ended that kind of where that story ended. When I got full custody in 2020 of my kids, life changed. It was a really big, profound moment at succeeding in what felt like an impossible situation. And yet, life wasn't over. You know, that's the thing with big events that happen in our lives, whether they are leaving abusive relationships, loss, anything going on, life doesn't end. And especially as a parent, you know, you still have to wake up and parent your children. You still have to deal with the day-to-day and take them to school and do all these things. And so for me, you know, not only did I get full custody, but it was also the beginning of the pandemic. And all of those things aligned from a timing perspective. And I really felt like it was this divine timing because they were never quarantined with him, never had anything to do. Whether it helped or hurt, I don't know. But it was the most healing opportunity for me and them. Because not only did they have to process the loss of a parent, because truly it was a loss. They lost their father in their lives, as far as I know, for good. And that's a big loss for any kid. But everything in their life changed, right? They were no longer going to school. They were home full time. Everything was online. Mom was home all the time. Just their whole world was turned upside down, as was most of ours. But in some ways, it was actually a blessing that it all happened at once because it wasn't just this one thing to focus on. Everything was different. And I really took the opportunity to re-ground with them, to reconnect with them. And we were now trying to figure out what is new normal with just me and them click. And, you know, my introvert child thrived. The other ones were really wanting more social interaction. We did our best to get out of the house in ways that felt safe to do so. And I was navigating working full-time from home, school from time from home, all these things. And eventually, I quit my job. I left my job, and that's a whole nother story in itself. But, you know, I focused on this other important aspect of my life, which was parenting my children and recovering from what we had just gone through. And it felt like the most important thing to focus on was processing everything that happened. And, you know, therapy during the pandemic went completely virtual, and I continued therapy because I needed it. But my kids, if anybody's ever tried to do therapy with young children on a screen, it just turns into like the iPad game and not actually communicating. And so I worked with my therapist best I could to help support my kids best I could, knowing things would change eventually. And, you know, my therapist at the time really helped support me supporting them. And we worked up a script to tell the kids about what had happened and how do I explain mental health to young children. How do I explain all of this in a way that's age appropriate? And also, it was really important from her perspective to place blame where it due. This is a whole conversation in itself, but I want to touch on this here because this was something that had a huge impact to my childhood the practice and the beliefs in the mental health and therapy worlds 20, 30 years ago was that you never want to tell children what actually happened. You were protecting them from this adult interaction, right? And it's not appropriate to share this information with children. And while I think in some cases that is absolutely true, kids know and feel a lot more than we give them credit for. And when we are essentially keeping information from them, especially if they're directly asking, you're actually in some ways lying and gaslighting them because they know something is going on. And that was not my mom's intention by any means. But at the same time, she very much believed she needed to protect me from all of these other things that had been happening in her marriage. And while I don't think she should have told me the grand details, I do think there was a place for her to explain in a different perspective rather than just not talking about it at all. Because what happened is, as I got older, he was the one who told me his side of the story, in which he was the victim. And now he was physically abusive towards my mom. He hit her. He only hit her once, but it was bad enough to need 2 root canals. And there had been a lot of control dynamics prior to that. And I didn't see all of that. I knew they were not happy, but I certainly didn't see all of that. All I could see was that she said that we were not allowed to see him. And according to him, that was her, opinion, this wasn't a court mandate. This was what she said. And all of the power was given to her to make the decisions of whether we were allowed to see him or not, in which case the answer was generally no. And so he basically made her the bad guy. And I took on that truth as a teenager who really wanted a relationship with my father. And I never could understand why I got that they weren't together. That's fine. But I could not understand why we were not allowed to see him on a regular basis. I didn't want to live with him, but I did want a relationship with him. And I felt like I wasn't allowed to have a relationship with him. And so, come full circle, obviously I've got a whole new perspective of my mom's situation. I get it differently. My mom actually got what I was going through, not at the exact scale, but she really did understand, in a sense, what it was like to be in this type of relationship. She understood what it like to feel like you question everything that you know to be true about who you are and all these things. And she also knew what it was like to stand up in court and fight against your kid's father, because that's all her story as well. And so we had been reconnecting, and she had come to the divorce hearing to support me in, real time. And there had been a lot of more kind of unpacking of my childhood with her, which was great. At the same time, I recognized that I needed something that I didn't get as a child. And so how could I give that to my kids? And so the therapists basically said, we still have to put blame where it's due. It's not that we need to give them the nitty-gritty details, that's the inappropriate conversations. But we do need to place blame where it's due. And so when they would ask about what had happened and why they couldn't see their father, the answer is always, he made the choice. Because the truth was, the court gave him another opportunity to show up. And I don't know about any of you out there, but as a parent, if the court says, here are the 10 things that you must do by this date in order to see your children, you damn well I would have done them long before the due date, because my kids are the most important thing in the world to me. But that's not what happened. He made the choice to not do those things. And the consequence per the court was that meant he would only be awarded supervised visitation, to which he then chose not to initiate, and he chose to no longer continue any contact. Those are all true statements. Now, it is also true that I am deeply grateful for that. I do believe in a sense that it was actually a gift that he was giving with me and them, because it's a lot easier to be outside of the trauma and to be away from the high conflict and to not have yourself be triggered. That is also true. But the reality of the court system was that he made his choice about his level of interaction with the children. And so I always made sure that I placed blame where it was due, that he has a sickness, he has an illness, and he struggles to know the difference between right and wrong, and he struggles to follow the recommendations. And therefore, in order to keep them safe, the children safe, this was the court's decision that he needed to follow these things, which he didn't do. And so I would always speak that language instead of not saying anything or kind of making stuff up or brushing past it, because I felt like it was so, so important that they never blame themselves either. Because I didn't blame me, but I said blame my mom. But there are many kids out there who blame themselves for their parents splitting up or their one parent not choosing to be in their lives. And that's not okay either. I didn't want that. I wanted them to really understand that this was his illness and his lessons. And it was hard, and it's okay to have feelings about it. And we went through many iterations of that, but that this was about him, not about them. And so how do we refocus and focus on supporting them in this process? And that was really my goal. And the pandemic awarded me the time and the space and the freedom to do that. And, at the same time, I'm also really interested to know more about this spiritual world that I'd rejected for so long. This awakening that was happening within me was new. This whole concept of spirit guides and angels and all of it, I had completely rejected. And I was raised by a very spiritual mom. But my mom was very love and light version of spiritual, and it felt like such a rejection of so many other parts of me that I wasn't interested. But now I was, because this had been such a big part of my journey now. Like, I really felt like I had this army of support behind me in a way that I never did before. And, I'd always stayed on the agnostic. I believed in something, I just didn't know what. And I was starting to really want to dig into what that was. And I don't know about any of you, but during the pandemic, there was a whole lot of rabbit holes to go down. And I went down a lot of them because I was trying to seek, I was trying to learn. And I found myself trying to understand this whole concept of spiritual awakening and how do we connect to angels and spirit guides and how do we work with energy and all of that. I had so many questions. And I landed myself in some pretty crazy groups, but I was really just continuing to seek and try to understand. And also, I really wanted to learn how I could do it too. Because there's this belief in me, and not everybody has this, but I definitely am one of these kind of people who, if I see that somebody can do something and it's interesting to me, I believe that I can too. If she can do it, so can I. I just have to learn how. And that is a deep belief in me. I don't think that things are inaccessible once they've been done and somebody has proven they can be done. Well, okay. So I kept seeking this. Okay, she can talk to angels. How do I talk to angels? What does this look like for me? And I really started to have this newfound belief that maybe this was possible. And, I hadn't quite put all these pieces together to realize that on some level, I already was very sensitive to energy. I just had been ignoring it. Being raised by a very spiritual mom, I was exposed to a lot of things, but I rejected it and didn't retain any of it because that was mom's thing, right? And yet it was all right there and it was starting to come back. And I was being reminded of these times, especially as a young child, where I was very intuitive and very body and emotionally sensitive. And it wasn't that I was emotional, but if people around me were emotional, I felt it in my body. As a baby, I would throw up on my mom. If she was upset, not if I was upset, she was upset. And my mom learned that. At 3 years old, I told my mom that she had a baby in her belly, to which she did not yet want to admit that she in fact did, but my sister was in there. And so, I've had these moments, but when it came to my relationships, I shut all of that off because I was so badly seeking acceptance and connection from men that I didn't listen to my instincts. The only place that I consistently have listened to my instinct as an adult was with my children. And I don't know about other moms out there, but at least for me, when it came to my kids, I knew what they needed in a different way. I felt in my body what they needed. And I didn't question that. I couldn't tell you how I knew, but I did. And I was more often than not correct, whether they were hungry or needed changed, or even if they had to go to the bathroom. I mean, when they were little, I did all of natural parenting, including elimination communication. My kids were all potty trained out of diapers before they were 2 years old because I just knew they needed to go. It was easy. And I'm not saying that in a right or wrong sort of way, but I was so focused on them and their needs, and I instinctively responded to them. And so I was starting to realize, like, I actually had these instincts. And I think that the vast majority of people out there have these instincts. We just don't know what they are or what to call them, or we're not taught to trust them. And that's hard, because if we're constantly seeking outside validation to trust our own instincts, well, that defeats the point of having the instinct. But I'm realizing this, and I'm realizing that I'm actually more capable, but I still want to learn. And so I dive deeper into energy healing. I dive deeper into this whole concept of a quantum realm, which is really where basically time does not exist in the linear form that we know, and that past and future are all now. And the reason that that's helpful is when you're talking about past lives, especially, that you can actually, in a sense, go back in time and heal from that past life that's replaying in this life. And so you can bridge those together and understand, as well as release, a lot of these traumas and patternings that aren't just playing out in our external realities, but they're sometimes even playing out in our physical bodies. And so I was seeing all of these connections, and I was understanding this connection between mental, our thought processes and our beliefs and our emotional state, as well as our physical bodies, as well as our spiritual states. And so there's this like map and puzzle that's unfolding before me. And I find teachers that I resonated with. I found teachers who weren't super just love and light and everything is perfect. And I found teachers talking about the darkness and the shadow work, and talking about how important it is to be whole in that sense and accept all of us and to recognize that. And I resonated with those teachers a lot more than the others, because I knew too much. This love and light world felt like a rejection of me as well as my experiences. And it was important that, people could actually see all of me. And I jumped into learning of what that looked like and how these things map in the body. And I discovered I was actually pretty darn good at this. And I was pretty darn good at intuitively knowing what was happening and asking the right questions and feeling in my bodies when I'm talking to somebody. I can pick this up. And it's really validating when you go through big traumatic experiences where you've been gaslighting yourself and you've been lying to yourself, and your external circumstances continue to make you question yourself for so long. And then all of a sudden you come out and you realize you actually have decent instincts. You actually know this stuff, and you actually are good parents. And it felt like that time was really, really validating for me in that. And I'm so grateful for it. And, I also had a lot of lessons. I continue to learn lessons the hard way. And, I think it's important to note here that, it wasn't that I got out of this situation and everything was sunshine and rainbows. Isn't that how it works? Because I still had, unpacking, and I still had patterns that are habitual in me. And I still wanted to see the best in people. And I'm not sure I'm ever going to let this one go. I always want to see the best in people. I always want to see their potential. And I'm starting to only now 4 years later, we're in, October of 2024, realize that a lot of times, just because I can see somebody's potential doesn't mean that's where they are. And so, that's been a new lesson in a sense, because it's one thing to be blind to a version of somebody completely, and it's another to see the potential for their future, but that they have zero desire of taking action on. And so, some of these teachers that I worked with, they were less good in some areas, but they still opened up a lot of doorways to what is possible. And I met a lot of wonderful, amazing people through these classes, and people from all over the world I was making connections with, and people who believe the same things. And I was having relationships with females that weren't, this catty high school stuff, because I really never had great female friends. I had a lot of high school mean girl stuff go on. And so, it was really nice in a lot of ways. But it was all virtual. It was all, from the comfort of my home. And so I really was feeling the need to leave, needing to leave Colorado, needing to get away from the potential of running into my ex-husband or his family. There wasn't any hurry, because there was lots, the pandemic was still happening. There was lots going on, but I really was seeking connection and community in a different way. And so eventually, after a year had passed, we petitioned the court and asked to be able to move. And he didn't respond. And so I was awarded, without any sort of hearing, the right to leave the state. And so that was freedom, right? Now what do I want? It's so funny when you fight for safety and security for so long, and you're fighting for survival, and all of a sudden you win. It's like there's nothing to fight for anymore. The mission accomplished. Mission is over. And it's almost this. It's actually really hard for a bit to even know who you are, what you want in that moment, because everything that you wanted, you succeeded. It's like it's like the same kind of feeling when you're reading a series and then you read the last one and it's over. And at the same time, it's your life. You're the one who needs to, pick back up the pen and write the next book. But what do you want to write about? What matters to you now? Who are you even now? And that's really the place that I was in. It felt like I could literally throw a dart at a map and we could go anywhere. And so, I sat with it a long time. I tried to figure out, okay, we need we need a house, we need income, we need these things, but I can create this anywhere. And I had this complete belief in myself in a new way because I succeeded at the impossible. So I could do anything. I just have to figure out what I want to do. And I, wanted to continue working with people and helping them. I knew that. I was also feeling deeply called to write my book and write this story out for the world. And so I started that process, and I started my energy healing business, and I started meeting with people. And most of the time they had similar relationship traumas that I did, not exactly, but most of the time they were mothers who, needed support and were carrying patterns and, didn't trust themselves, all of the same stuff. And so it's a beautiful reflection and a way to recognize it and recognize that I've overcome so much of it, and yet there's more to go. And so eventually we did leave Colorado. We left in 2021, and we got redirected a couple of times. I ended up connecting with somebody. I went to this retreat in Banff, Alberta, and it was a very synchronistic meeting. But he was the only man in this particular energy healing class, and I was the only American. And for whatever reason, because of the pandemic, they changed venues 3 different times, and there was all kinds of craziness going on because the restrictions in Canada were crazy, as were the US, but Canada was particularly bad at this time. And so they actually forgot that the American was coming because they had a different retreat in the US. And so they completely forgot that I was coming. And when it came to the day, here's everybody's room assignments and blah, 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 I was missing. Okay, well, the only person who didn't have a roommate was the only man. So they said, if you're comfortable, and I'm like, well, there's 2 beds, it's fine. We had met over Zoom many times. Yeah, it's all good. So I ended up staying with him in the room. And that energy healing workshop was a really big shift for me energetically in a lot of ways, because I got hands-on experience now. I got to actually feel in my body what it was like to work on my body. Because prior to this, it was all remote. And so there was a huge amount of understanding about the connection in person, and that, yes, you can do it all remote, but in person's even more potent, as well as these connections in person to all these people I had met online. But even more than that, this man that I ended up staying with, we ended up connecting. And that was the first time I felt like I had an emotional, safe connection with a man. And this was profound for me. Like, I could not put words to this because, I historically had been fairly, I was a very promiscuous teenager. And so the physical things, that wasn't the point here. But I had never been connected with a male that was emotionally and spiritually available. I didn't even recognize that you could have emotional intimacy with a partnership. And it was this what the heck was that feeling? And, it's funny to look back because, of course, you need more than a physical or mental connection with somebody, and yet didn't occur to me because I had no model for it. I had no example for it. Every man in my life had been very intellectual and very emotionally unavailable. And so I just kind of, okay, this is interesting. I'm intrigued. And we ended up staying in contact, and we ended up eventually moving in together. And, it's fascinating because this is about at the point when I am finishing up writing my book. And I'm writing my book and I'm thinking about reflecting all these things. And, here I am with a new person in a new place. And it feels like we've overcome so much, but I was still really in this, what do I want? I don't actually just want a relationship. I want to go do something in the world. I want to go make big impacts, but I don't know what this looks like. And so I'm just going to continue on. And we moved in together, and, things were mostly okay. He was a single guy who had never been married and didn't have any children, and I had 3 crazy boys. So it was a lot to process. It was a lot to go through. It was a lot of, what does it even mean to live with children? And they had their reactions and responses. They were very testing of him. Is he going to stick around? What do you think? And, we worked through a lot of it. And things settled down. And eventually, after actually very quickly, I ended up pregnant. And I wasn't trying to get pregnant. At some point, we'll talk more about this. I think I mentioned it in a couple interviews that will come in the future, but I'm like the most fertile person on the planet. And so I end up pregnant, and I'm not sure I'm very happy about it, to be honest, because this is a new relationship. I'm still healing in a lot of ways. I'm not sure what I think. I don't know what the kids are going to think. But I end up miscarrying at 9 weeks. And, this is a double-edged thing because on one hand, it's a loss. On the other hand, there's relief when you're not sure you actually want to be pregnant. And so I miscarried at 9 weeks. But during those 9 weeks, he proposed and asked me to marry him because we were going to have a baby. And I said yes. And then we grappled with, do we still want to get married? And in the end, we decided we did. And so we got married in 2022 and, settled into what this is going to look like. And, whether we wanted to have another child or not was still in the, kind of in the air. I was on the pretty unsure side, and he wasn't sure one way or another. And so we continued, with our lives and continued. I launched my book in early 2023. And it became a #1 bestseller, which was very exciting for me. And then I also got the next message that I would be delivering a TEDx talk. Cool. Well, that's a big one that I wanted to do more writing and speaking, and I wanted to share my story in bigger ways, and I wanted to help people on other platforms, but that was big. I had never given a talk on stage before, but I was open, and I felt into it, and I started applying. And, not too shortly after, I actually got a TEDx talk. I delivered my TEDx talk in February of 2024 called The Healing Power of Storytelling. And, that was a really big, profound moment because I really felt like I came alive on stage. And I had this feeling of, this could really be something. I could do more of this. And I worked for months on that talk and practiced in front of groups of people to feel comfortable on stage. And I really was very proud of how it came out. If you're interested, I can put it in the show notes, but you can also just Google The Healing Power of Storytelling and TEDx, and I'm sure it will come up. But I was really proud of how it came out, and I was really proud of how it came through, and it really felt like a channeled message to the world. It really felt like through my story, I was channeling this experience in a way that could be accepted on this platform. And kind of understanding that I've been doing more and more of this, and I've been connecting in bigger and bigger ways. And, we ended up having to move again, and we moved, houses, and, all of things are upheavaling in our lives in different ways, but we, continue to stay grounded. And I'm really getting this example of how much can change in your lives. But what actually matters when it comes to our kids is that we stay grounded and we stay okay, especially as moms. But even any parents who are deeply connected to their children, our kids always look to us for that grounding. And so much has happened, in these couple of years. But my kids are actually more and more okay because I'm more and more okay myself. And the more I heal and continuing to see, the better they continue to be. But, they're in now new schools again, and everybody's actually doing pretty okay. Everybody's doing pretty okay, and we're just resettling into this new normal again. And, it's at this point in time that I'm now going, okay, I've written the book. I've given the talk. I've done some things in my business. I've done some programs. What matters to me again? And I don't think I'm alone in this. We go through these death and rebirth processes over and over and over and over again. And the more we do it, the faster we get at it. But the more we still sit in this place, and I like to call it now this void. You put the book down and you're in the void. What book do you want to read next? What story are you creating next? What do you want for your lives? And that's really where I got to this summer. And I'm going to save the entire 2024 summer for episode number 3 before we get into interviews. But what I want to reiterate here is that healing is not a linear process, and that the journey that we go on to overcome does not stop. And that the more we do it and the more we accept that we do it, the easier we get to be validated in trusting ourselves again. And, just in the period from the divorce to this year, we moved, I don't even know, countless times. I can't even count them all in my head right now. But a couple of them were very big moves, and there were multiple different school changes. And I was really trying to figure out where home was. And I've been seeking home. And then I found home in a new person. But that story doesn't end yet. So I want to save this summer for this last episode because it was probably, I don't think I can say the most transformational, but it was like 4 years packed into 3 months this summer. And right before this summer started, I had been really digging into what it was going to look like to me to go forward next. And what I continued to come back to is mom, coming back to motherhood, coming back to my connection to my kids. And I realized that I had not been sharing as much of me other than my big story in my day-to-day life with my children. I hadn't actually been realizing how connected I was to them in a way that it just felt normal to me. But I was trying to bring things out on the more spiritual side instead of recognizing the need to connect it to the motherhood side. And so part of the goal for this podcast is to bring both of those together, to talk about the stories of motherhood, the overcoming stories, the big challenges, the things that happened, and the spiritual awarenesses that come from them. And we do so through our lived experiences and our stories. And whether that's the healing modality that we came up with or discovered, whether that's the, never going to have that kind of relationship or be able to support our children in a different way, whatever the thing is, that's the point of going through these experiences. And I look back and I go, that's the lesson I needed. I see it now. And I can laugh at myself and I don't sit in this heavy place. And it's a real good thing that I don't, because the universe wasn't done with me yet. Probably still isn't. But, coming around to this place and being grounded now in a home that is finally ours again, and a place where my kids are thriving. We got there in the beginning of 2024. We got there. And I was so excited. I even received a dream message about this house that we were going to buy. It was actually 2 weeks before my TED Talk, and woke up in the morning and I was so excited because I heard the number of exactly how much the house was going to be, and it was going to be the perfect house with the perfect location for everybody's needs. And I remember thinking back then, like, there's no houses in that price range that I would like. Okay. And they're like, oh, that's a nice fantasy. Okay. And I let it go. And then about a month later, after I got back from my talk, a house came on the market and it was $10,000 less than the price in my dream. And I was like, well, I like that house. That's new. We went to go see it. And for anybody who knows me, my favorite color is pink. Everything in my house is pink. And the house was flipping pink. I think that's my house. And then we went to visit it and like, I love it, let's buy it. We put an offer in at asking price. And then the realtor says, I think if you upped it $10,000, they would just take it, matching my dream price, right? It's like, okay, let's do it. And then we find out that there's like multiple competing offers. The market is still crazy and all the things. And they were wanting us to adjust or go higher or whatever. And I was like, no, that's the price. And lo and behold, we were not the highest offer, but they still chose us because they wanted a family in the house and they saw us all come and they saw the kids and they really wanted a family here. So they took our offer. And so things like that were happening in my life. These synchronistic things to let me know this is my place. This is where we're supposed to be. I feel grounded here. I feel good. I did go back to work full time in 2023 as well. And this job that I'm fully remote, I get to work from anywhere. I get to be supported in a very flexible schedule, which with 3 kids you need. And I realized how much the universe was able to show up for me if I took the steps that I needed. And I've been led to so many amazing experiences. And so I'm going to end here before I get into this summer because it needs a whole episode in itself. And my goal in sharing all of this is to really talk through what it looks like to heal, because it's up and down and sideways. And it's not simple. And becoming ourselves and stepping into what I'm calling awakened motherhood takes some trials and takes some tribulations and challenges and coming back home to ourselves time and time and time again. And I know for me, it's coming back home to me and it's coming back home to my boys. Every single time my life has a full circle moment, I'm always back to me and them. And every time it happens, I go home. Okay, here we are together again. We're good and we're grounded. All right, guys, I will see you in episode number 3. Lots of love. Thank you for joining us on Awakened Motherhood. I hope today's episode inspired you and offered support for your journey. Remember, your story has the power to ignite change, and your resilience is a testament to your strength as a mother. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Share it with other mothers who might benefit from our stories of empowerment and healing. I invite you to connect with me on social media platforms at Amanda Quick Healing, or visit my website, amandaquickhealing.com, for more information on other ways to work with me. Until next time, keep embracing your divine self and discovering your warrior mama within. Thank you for being part of Awakened Motherhood, where your story is the spark for change.